When you think about an SDR trying to go out to a C-suite level of a Fortune 1000 company, and they send some sort of AI-created shenanigans, it's not going to work.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Future of Marketing. Today, we have with us Jonathan Kvarfordt, also known as Coach K. And Jonathan has an awesome background in AI and GTM. He actually founded the GTM AI Academy in 2022 before most people heard of ChatGPT. And since then, he's put over 10,000 GTM professionals through it. He also teaches AI at Bryant University. And he's now the VP of Marketing at OneMind, a company started by my friend Amanda that's pioneering AI-led growth and just launched an AI that joins live sales as a visible named participant speaking directly to buyers in real time. Jonathan's main framework for AI adoption is optimization, amplification, reinvention. And he actually helped one sales team go from 15 BDRs generating only 15% of pipeline to 4 BDRs, generating 30%. So we can't wait to dig into how you did that. So welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate you and the audience listening in. I have to correct one thing. I actually did not help the team you're referring to do that. I was there on my podcast and we chat about the strategy. However, I have helped other teams do something similar. So happy to go into details on that, but appreciate you having me.
Cool. Well, excited to have you, and we can still dig into that as, from what you've learned from it. So let's get straight into it. You're pioneering AI in the SDR space, and you've been in go-to-market for a while. Describe your SDR function to us. You're one of the few teams that actually is also running SDRs. How do you structure your org?
Well, right now we actually do not have any SDRs in the company at all. All we use is our product does one of the use cases. We have 5. One of the use cases is called an inbound website, and some people call it an SDR. But I think what I need to correct is that we've had to put our definition of what AI can do based on current rules that we have. And what the reality is that AI, at least ours anyways, has much more capabilities. That's more like a solutions engineer versus an SDR. Because when you think about the capabilities or skills of an SDR, you're limited on their knowledge, there's abilities, that kind of stuff. And our vision, our goal is to have a deep professional expert level solutions engineer type of knowledge, and not just knowledge, but ability to actually go into depth. For example, on the website, most of the companies who compete against us, they focus on optimizing for the meetings booked, which we think that's an outdated model. And instead, we try to, our whole narrative is around how do we make things a delightful experience for the customers or for the buyers? Because the meetings booked is still optimizing for the seller. It's not optimizing for the buyer. So we're trying to figure out how do we make it so it's better for the buyer so that they can get what they need to have, whether that's an in-depth demo that you can walk around and poke through with the AI, whether it's having a pricing conversation, whatever that might be. It's does the AI have the capability to not only interact vocally, but to be able to do things and show people information so they can make the best decisions they can as a buyer? I can't tell you how many people who have come on. In fact, the CEO of Ultrix actually, who's they're in a massive company, and he came on and talked to our website superhuman, Mindy, who some people would qualify as an SDR, but I don't qualify that way. She's more of a solution engineer. And he came in and had 10 conversations with her before he ever talked to a human. And by the time he did come in, the conversation wasn't, hey, should we buy you? He was saying, okay, I want to use you here, 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 and here. He was way farther into his buying decision process. And so literally at that point, it's more like taking an order versus the regular sales process. So, I mean, that obviously changes based on everyone we have coming in. But I think the biggest thing I want to have people take away from is how much can AI cover some of your buying process, buyer coverage, and then really making sure that the humans you have are used in the best way possible where they're needed more than ever, which is relationships and multi-stakeholder management and all the items that people still want people to do. Does that make sense? So does that help? Can I give some clarity?
So if you don't have SDRs, and Mindy's kind of a sales engineer for you, basically, because that's what AI is best, how do you source your pipeline? Where does your pipeline come from?
Well, to be fair, I just started, I'm in my month 3, so I've been here 2.5 months already. And right now, a lot of our pipeline comes from events, from our own founder, Mada. She's all over the place speaking and podcasts. And so she's obviously a huge source of pipeline just because she's very passionate, very amazing woman who just brings in people because she's so dynamic. So that's a good place. And then, and the website, what I love about it is anything I do in marketing is my job is to bring people to the website, and then I let Mindy do what Mindy does and let her convert people from there, which is awesome. Outside of that, we're going into a little bit different, I would say, kind of more marketing strategy, which I'm happy to talk about, but it's kind of all over the place based on.
So much for everyone's building stuff, and it's easier to build, and it's much harder to get in front of customers. So I'm curious of what you've seen work in other companies, and also like, now you've been of one mind, what have you seen worked really well, and what are some playbooks you recommend?
Well, there's two sides. I'm well aware of many companies who use AI SDRs or BDRs, and I have nothing against them because if it works, it's great. But for me, I'm always like, what is the ICP leaning towards? What do they prefer? And I want to optimize for whatever that is, because that's going to change based on any industry you're in, from healthcare to finances to tech to whatever. So that's the first question: is what would resonate the best with them? Secondly, when I was at Momentum, we had a massive, like half my team was in Argentina, and we had this really big SDR team. It was 35 people large, and my marketing team was 5. And what was interesting is that we actually were the original source of most of both the pipeline and the revenue, but the team that converted the most was actually SDRs doing follow-ups on LinkedIn, specifically doing very human-based messaging. So of course they had like ample market for automation, they had all these AI tools helping with messaging, but the things that really cut through was them making a custom GPT picture of the person based on their profile, or leaving a video recording of them saying, "Hey, I'm actually a person, please talk to me," and actually doing more human-like things. Does that make sense? So, like I said, most of the pipeline was generated from marketing, but what converted it was the human touch from the SDRs, which I found very fascinating. I don't know if that's the case with everyone else, because I've seen lots of other teams who do things just with AI. But for me, anyways, in tech right now, it is so noisy, and I'm getting blasted with AI crap all over the place, where people are like, I'll give you an example where we released a book with Momentum last fall, and I had 4 or 5 people, I'm not kidding, messaging me about writing a book, and what do you think about writing a book and go to market in AI? I'm like, I did in November. Where have you been? Like, if you paid attention, all you would know I have a book already out, but AI didn't pick that up for a reason. So their message comes through as kind of deaf to who I am, and I'm not going to talk to them because it shows me they're just doing the lazy route. Does that make sense? People, in my opinion, in tech want effort. They want to be able to see that someone's willing to do more than just blast a AI email at them. They want to see that something actually has happened to catch their eye. Otherwise, you're just in the noise of everyone else.
Yeah, I would love to ask a follow-up question. So maybe you could help just map out the funnel from acquiring someone to eventually closing them, and where AI fits and where it doesn't fit. And it sounds like the beginning, which is where most people think AI fits with mass AI outreach, you did the exact opposite, which is marketing, in-person events, things like that. And then you're using AI also in somewhat a contrary way. So the way that I think about it is AI can make things cheaper, or it can make things better. And I think that that's sort of what you're describing, which is, yes, we could do something that's not important more cheaply, or we could have an even better process by explaining what we do, and then it leads really qualified when it gets to people. But I'm curious if you could just sort of map out all the steps in the funnel, where AI fits in, where humans fit in.
Yeah, I'd actually add a third one to your thing around cheaper or faster, and I would add do something totally different. Just because with most AI that I see, most teams are trying to do what they did before, just better, faster, and easier. That's why AI, their goal is to book meetings. And the question is that all AI can do? And if not, what else can we do to make it a better experience, as an example? But like with, I'll start with Momentum, and I'll go with what we're doing here to kind of map between the two. So with Momentum, I have a different theory, and that is in tech, and I guess is your audience mostly tech? Can I ask your audience?
Yeah, it's usually, we think it's tech, like marketing CMOs, but also like just people in AI and in marketing that trying to like adapt to what's happening with AI.
I personally believe in having 4 pillars that drive everything, including the outbound motion. Because before I started with Momentum, they had the SDR team, but they had such a hard time booking meetings because no one knew who the heck Momentum was. They didn't know who we were. Once they did know us, they're asking questions like, why would I use you versus a Zapier or versus a Gong, which were, if you know anything about Momentum, was kind of like a combo between those two tech. So the problem is that we had a 12-person, 15-person SDR motion that just wasn't really working, not because they weren't doing good work and not doing good messaging, because no one knew who the heck we were. So my job in Momentum was to try and make sure I could get us out there, and not only get us out there, but be trusted. So did you guys ever see in Momentum stuff? I don't know if you ever did last year, but we were like, I got told all the time we were everywhere, and I did that on purpose. So I have 4 pillars. Okay. There are, first off, is using your customers as an amplification. So I would grab our customers and have them go out to events or other places that the win was they would build their thought leadership. And my request was when AI comes up in conversation, just naturally talk about us like you would any other AI tech, but let it be momentum at the time, which worked really, really well. So that's number one is like, how do I weaponize my customers beyond just case studies? How do I get them out there in a place that they win and that it wins for me as well, which is most of them just want to get thought leadership and more following. So that's number one. Number two was, where are the core, I would say to make it easier for your audience, I'd say the core top 20, I do top 100 for me personally, but I'll say top 20 communities, thought leaders, whoever that has the voice of in your ICP that actually listens to them. And either I would make a partnership with them or I would sponsor them or do something so I can have access to the community versus trying to go after every single person one by one. I want to go after the people who have the trust of the community and then align with them and see what I can do to obviously gain that trust via them. So that's number two. Number three is everything I did was always trying to provide value. So for example, we did webinar series, released a book. I had back in the day when skills were not a thing and it was prompts, I had a 200 prompt library that I personally wrote all of them because I've been a prompt engineer for 4 years now. And it was for go-to-market people. So I created all this valuable content that wasn't just fluffy ROI calculators so that people would actually come to us and want the content we have. And then lastly is so it was the customers were, I guess you could say a weapon, not just case studies. Two is the core 20, I call them the core 100. And then three is leading with value and actually giving something that whether or not the ICP bought from me, it would be valuable for them to have. That was my goal. Like, how do I give something that even if they never talk to me, they're going to know us because it's valuable content. Number four is studio sound, which just means, or surround sound. I'm a musician, so I was thinking sound. And I was always like, how can I make sure that we are everywhere? So no matter where an ICP of ours goes, we're there. So that meant AEO, that meant SEO, it meant obviously doing our own podcast and sending my founders out there and me out there and posting things and LinkedIn influencers and all this other stuff. And then what that resulted in was a lot of inbound, a lot of traffic to webinars we would host to the prompt library was our best lead bag that I had all year long. It produced more pipeline than anything else I ever did. And the cool thing was when I had those four things, the SDRs just bolted onto it instead of being the main function. So SDRs would send out the prompt library. They send out a webinar invite. They send out the book. They send out all this stuff so they have content and some meat to actually get someone's attention. Otherwise, they just fall into the crowd of all the other noise going on in the space. Does that make sense? And I wanted to make sure that the brand itself had enough weight to make their job easier. So fast forward from when I started in January 2025 to May 2025, the difference between how much they're booking was night and day because people then knew who the heck we were because they didn't know before. We didn't have any trust in the market. And that drastically shifted to the tune of obviously getting acquired by Salesforce, which was, I won't say it was a team effort. It was not just marketing. There's a lot of people involved with that, but it was definitely a part of it, you know. So does that help? I don't know if that helps you with you, Ethan, as far as like the steps you're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. And then so those were everything that you just described, those steps in the funnel are exactly where people would think that AI would replace people. And yet what you're describing is, a particularly human first, in-person type stuff. And then I'm wondering, where does AI fit in terms of starting there with acquiring people, qualifying them, and then eventually selling them?
Well, there's anything from analyzing the data and the people coming in to make sure we're having the right impact so that in our sales cycle back then, it's still one mine, it was 90 days. So I could sell pretty quickly within a quarter from a data analysis point of view of what's resonating, where things are coming in. I could do that via Claude Code at any time so I can make decisions really quickly. The other part of it was when we recorded content or videos, because of AI, we're pumping out way more content than we would have before because we are AI optimized. My team was an events leader, 2 designers, an ops person, and then an actual content writer. And I have her because, I know AI can write, but she's a very, very good writer, and I needed someone to make sure we didn't just have AI shenanigans going everywhere because my reputation meant a lot to us as a brand. And so she worked a lot on making sure it was as good as it could be.
What made you decide? I have now heard of teams where there's like, it's a small team, but 2 designers. What made you make that decision? Some teams don't even have a designer. They just contract and they have more people than what you're describing.
Yeah, I got told we were going through Series B before we got acquired that our brand or our team felt like a 30-person team in a Series D company. I'm like, we're 5 and we're Series A. So took a lot of pride in that because my team works very fast. I've worked with them for several years now, so we work really well together. But I did that because, again, the brand experience that I wanted someone to experience was not just some AI design shenanigans. It was like a really good, our ICP was mid-market enterprise. I can't go after them, at least at the time a year ago. I mean, now we have Claude Design, but even with Claude Design being really, really good, it's not the same as enterprise design. I can't do that.
So I mean, I use it a lot, and it's just not, I know now when something is designed by Claude. Now I've...
Right. So when you think about an SDR trying to go out to a C-suite level of a Fortune 1000 company, and they send some sort of AI-created shenanigans, it's not going to work. You got to bring some sort of quality and some depth and relevance to that person so they actually take 5 seconds to look at what you're doing. Otherwise, they're just going to get blasted by everybody else on the market doing the easy way. So to me, I try to optimize for humans for the hard things like design, like creating human experiences on podcasts, like all that stuff. And then behind the scenes, we are AI-fying everything. So we just pumped out all the content. In fact, the book, I wrote the book with AI in a week. It took longer to edit it, but I wrote it in a week because I had AI. Like I never would be able to do that without AI. It would have taken a year to do it, you know? So to say that we weren't AI-fied at all is not accurate. It's more of like, what can we do now? And I've been testing out, I'm deep in the go-to-market AI space, and I've tested out AI CMOs and using Claude Code for this and that. And I know there's a ton of things you can do. I'm just seeing this pattern though of like a lot of AI things that people talk about are for smaller agencies or for individuals, and that doesn't always map out directly to mid-market and enterprise. They're just not there yet for security reasons, for governance, for whatever. So you still have to have some human element, you know, which is, yeah.
I mean, the governance and security are like really big. We're like an AI data layer, and I think the biggest challenge when we go into large companies, it really is like, how do you make sure that only the people with the right access have access to the right data? And companies like us are building that, but Claude doesn't have that, right? Like everything, you can get access to everything. And I think they're going in that direction as well, but it's not, it's very interesting. What outside of this, what do you think are things that AI cannot do and you still need humans and go to market? Obviously design, we've talked about it. We've talked about, making security and governance, but outside of those too.
I'm going to go into OneMind now. I'm going to shift gears to OneMind because this is part of what we talk about. When you think about, again, the buyer's journey, not from a seller's point of view, but from a buyer's point of view, the process people go through is pretty miserable, having to talk to, I don't know how many people and wait, who knows how many days to get answers to questions. So AI now, with our technology, we can replace a lot of tasks for a human, but I think the goal or the key is going to be, what does the buyer want? When does the buyer want to have a human involved or not? And depending on the threshold of complexity or amount of investment, there's like, for example, HubSpot is a good example of this, where the first time they used us, they put our technology in their free trial upsell motion, which they had no humans there at all. So they had no coverage. They didn't lay off anybody to replace with AI. They were just like, we need help here because there's so much volume, but it's so little purchasing power that it's just not worth us putting somewhere on it because we just don't get any money out of it, right? So they put the superhuman there, and within the first quarter of running it, they had what they replaced. They had a capacity lift of 83 SDRs and 19 solution engineers with a ton of pipeline and more revenue they ever thought even existed in that place. They never had humans for anyways. Does that make sense? So part of this is understanding that there's things that AI can do that we are never aware of because we don't know until we try it. And two is that there's a lot of tasks that humans are historically not as good at, but we force people to do because that's the only option we had, was to have humans do it. Again, like the ride-along, where we have, I can't tell you how many solutions engineers that join a company. I used to be in enablement, and I trained a lot of them, that they would tell me, like, most of my calls are answering the basic questions. Like, I'm not doing anything creative. I'm just a answer monkey, just saying the same answers over and over and over and over again. So being able to give someone the ability to really be creative in their solutioning and strategic as a solution engineer frees them up to use their skills the best way, and then allows the solution engineer role to be scaled in a way they never had before because they couldn't afford to do it, because solution engineers are not cheap, and because it's hard to find good solution engineers. They're very talented people that are extremely difficult to find. So having an AI be able to cover 80, 90% of all the questions, and then let the 10% of really meaty, creative solution go to an AI or to the human, is the best of both worlds.
This episode is brought to you by Upside. If you've ever tried to answer the question, what actually drove that deal, or where should I invest next quarter, you know how messy B2B intelligence really is. Upside is a revenue intelligence platform built by engineers and marketers who spent over a decade in the trenches at companies like Branch, Outreach, and MuleSoft. We got tired of building internal tools just to make sense of our own data, so we built the platform we always wish we had. Upside uses AI to unlock and organize the messy data in calls, transcripts, Salesforce fields, marketing automation tools, and beyond to help you answer the questions you never could before. Questions like what actually drove a specific deal and how brand awareness helped influence the buying group, or the reasons you are winning or losing. Better insights, smarter decisions, stronger outcomes. If you're ready to act with confidence rather than guessing, head to Upside.tech to learn more. That's very cool. I actually did not know that OneMind was doing that. And I think it makes so much sense, right? Even as a founder, sometimes there are technical questions in calls and I have no idea how to answer them. And I'm like, oh, I need to ask my co-founder. So it's a really good use case.
Or even like product teams, because of Cloud Code, they're pumping out products like crazy. So the teams are, even if they're really good, like Kyle at Owner, he's one of the best in the business and his enablement team is amazing. But his product team is doing so much content or product updates that the enablement team can't keep up. Yeah, and even if they could, a human can't consume all information intelligently and actually use it in a conversation. When you have a new product on Monday, you have to pitch it on Wednesday. It's just not going to happen, you know? So anyways, there's a lot of use cases for it, but I find it fascinating where we're going.
If you have any examples of a non-obvious use of AI that made the experience way better, do you have anything like that?
When I was I just did this now, actually. So I'll tell you two things again from Momentum and OneMind. So at Momentum, it was a data company from human-to-human conversations. And so we got permission from different customers to tear apart their data from conversational data that was inside of Salesforce and then map that to their own content, like their ACV and their win ratio, et cetera, et cetera. So I built out this, what's called a Momentum IQ report, which eventually became the deep research product. And the coolest thing was be able to do analysis for them that was a pretty powerful analysis. So one of the customers we did it for was Ramp. And the IQ report that I made went all the way to the top echelon of people of the findings that I would like to say it was me, but it was really AI. It was me and AI prompting through the stuff. And we made this killer presentation that I took the leadership team through and said, okay, here's what we're seeing. Here's where you're weak. Here's where you're strong. Here's what you shoot for positioning. Here's your enablement. I gave them an entire plan for a year based on all this information that they never had access for, because what human has the time to listen to first 1,000 calls and then to map those 1,000 calls in a way that you can actually have structured data to then map against your ACV, win ratios, industries, titles, all that stuff. I couldn't do that. And if I did, it took me forever. But with AI, I can do it like immediately. So now with OneMind, I'm doing the exact same thing with our conversations with our tech to figure out what's the differences between human-to-human conversation and then human-to-AI conversation. And the results so far are fascinating. That's what I love about AI, is be able to ask questions to a mass amount of data in a way that would have taken me days, hours, weeks.
What are some differences between human-to-human versus human-to-AI conversations?
I'll give you some small ones. So there's things like with our own tech I'll probably talk about later, but like one small one is that human to AI is a lot more direct. Therefore, the signal is a lot more clean because people just don't fluff words with AI. The politeness goes away. What's interesting is that even the ums or filler words are less with AI. Like, I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because
for the person talking to AI, they have less
for the person.
Interesting.
Yeah, like there's an average, Gong had a report that talked about the average filler words in sales conversations. So I used that report and then compared it against our own. And it's like 10x less filler words to human AI, which is fascinating. The other part is that we're consistently finding across the board that AI, if you mapped out your marketing and then your sales process by exit criteria, and you said, okay, how much of this conversation with this person met the criteria of these stages, we're on average getting someone to stage 3 of the sales process, on average, whereas most people are optimizing for meetings booked. So imagine a world where instead of the AE having to go through stage 1 and 2, that's already done. And when they pick up the call from the human who's already talked to an AI, they're at stage 3. It's like they're a lot more warmer, a lot more researched, and more ready to go with whatever product they're looking at, which is, again, fascinating to see that, which is why I bring up the topic of buyer coverage, because I think AI can do more than we expect. And my founder likes to compare it to Uber. Like when Uber first came out, everyone's like, why would I take an Uber with a stranger? It's so weird. But now it's just what we do. I think in the future, just like you with travel, you have a taxi, you have rent a car, you have Uber, you have Waymo, and you have walk. When you go to a company's website, people are going to, I don't know if demand's the right word, people are going to expect an experience of some kind. Some people will be very adamant and say, I don't want to talk to an AI, I want to talk to a human. And others will be like totally okay with an AI if it's a good experience. And what I'm noticing between the data is that if there's any lag in conversation, which is one thing we pride ourselves on, is the speed. If there's lag in conversation, people check out, because if you have to wait 10 seconds for an AI, you're out of there, you know? So the faster we are, the better the signal, better conversation, which gives you better data on what's happening on the website, which is,
I mean, you can actually make the point that websites in the future, and I know, like, I know you guys are doing, have sponsored the intelligent website discussion, but there's a world in which websites are not really needed. Like, you go in and maybe you have, one thing, and then you just like talk to and you ask your questions, and like it helps you figure out what you need. And so I think that's like also interesting.
yeah, the world we're going into, I don't know if anyone really knows where we're going, but it is obvious that it's going to be optimized around the user's interface, which is why I think there's such a battle between Slack and ChatGPT and Claude and Codex, is that it's the interface they're battling over. So I could see a time which we're actually working on something like this, where the website, I wouldn't say is irrelevant, but more changes how it optimized. Because right now, like, think about your core as you're human, you talk to an interface, it has to go out to the market, find some websites, come back and give you an answer. Like, what if that was reversed to where you have an interface and the websites come to you? Like, it starts connecting in so that it's right immediately available, which is like to your point. So
What are you guys doing? Ethan is the expert here on AEO and GEO, but I'm curious if how do you guys think about that? How are you building that now? Did you work on it at Momentum? Is that top of mind?
yeah, I don't know if I'll tell you right now, I don't know if I'm an expert. I'm definitely a nerd. So we did a lot with AEO at Momentum, where we were outranking Gong and Salesforce after 4 or 5 months of doing some stuff, which is really cool to see. And right now, like, we literally just got our rebranded website up like this week. So I haven't been able to do a lot because of rebranding and infrastructure on the tech, and our tech has to like optimize well with the Webflow platform. So it's all these things have held me back, but I'm really excited about getting into the 8-year-old world now with different technologies, from Scrunch to Searchable to all sorts of cool things I have access to, I get to play with. So it'll be fun. And Ethan, I'd love to have your thoughts. Like, tell me what I should do. What's my low-hanging fruit? Give me the goods.
Well, I think that the way I think about it is SEO works for free, but long-tail product content works, and then offsite works. So long-tail product content would be, I want a tool that does this, this, and this, or help me plan out my sales team. And part of that will be, using OneMind. So that could be, but that's a lot of questions about OneMind, or about what OneMind does, or about how to use it, which is not really what a lot of SEO would do. So product content and then offsite. And that's probably what you saw with Gong. I'm curious, did you know what caused you to outrank Gong and Salesforce early on?
I think part of it was we released so we took a lot of time in July of last year to write a lot of in-depth, authority-driven content that was optimized structurally for AI consumption. And we had all the different coding in the background. So we released, I think, 110 blogs in a week's time. And it wasn't just fluffy shenanigans. Like, we spent a month working on these blogs, optimizing and making sure it works well, and then blew it all out there. And after that, we just spiked up and started to kick their butts a little bit. And I think that was also because I was a little bit ahead of the curve than they were at the time. Now I think it's a different story, because Gong has restructured their website since we did that in July. But back then, like, AEO was kind of sort of still a new thing that I was experimenting with and playing with. And I don't think they were as much. And now they are, so it'd be a different story now, but I think that's definitely part of it. The other thing too is we were working with Noble. Noble was getting us off-site or off website mentions with HubSpot and ZoomInfo and all these other big, well-domained authority type texts. They just mention our technology. And then I had a lot of PR. So I know it's been confirmed now, but back then we didn't know that LinkedIn influenced AEO. We do now. And back then I was doing a ton of LinkedIn stuff that I never saw in the AEO, but now I know what affects us. So it's just interesting to see what was going on that also could have, impacted it.
One of the up and coming roles is this idea of like teams are starting to hire GTM engineers. I tried to be a GTM engineer myself and built like a website that like crawls every day through jobs and is trying to understand, like, is this role growing? I broke it into 8 archetypes. So I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts around this? I know you started the GTM AI Academy in 2022. Are you still involved in that? Do you think that this is still an area that's growing, or is it like, have we reached the point where this is really a role? Are you hiring for this role?
We're looking for more of an AI ops person more than anything. Cause like, I think the challenge, like there's some report that someone came out with, I have to remember who it was. I think it was maybe, who was it, Brendan? Someone came out with a report that talked about, they did research on the go-to-market engineer role and how 90% of the people who have go-to-market engineer roles on LinkedIn are at agencies. They're not at companies. And then like when you look at the focus of what they're doing, it's Clay focus. And because Clay came up with the term, to be a G2 engineer, you have to know Clay. So it's like, it's kind of a siloed thing. And personally, I've seen it kind of expand. It's not anymore.
Share my report.
Yeah.
It's only 30% of the current roles are the Clay archetype. 70% are like a split of like very technical growth. I have like 8 archetypes, but the biggest one is still the Clay. You're right about that. It's not 90% though anymore.
Yeah, when I saw that data was last fall, so it's been a while. So I'm glad it's changed. But like, I think the challenge is that most go-to-market engineers that I know of, and this is no diss to them, are very in the weeds, and that's not a bad thing, but they don't have that strategic lens that you need to make sure you impact. Because the problem I have with go-to-market engineers is that they, strangely enough, optimize workflows that don't necessarily make a difference in the business metrics. That's the problem I have. Like they optimize workflows, but then 6 months later, how many of these G2 engineers can go back and say, hey, we lifted win rates by 5%, or a sales cycle has been reduced by 10%, or whatever. Like no one's talking about that. They just say, hey, I made this cool workflow. I'm going to go share on LinkedIn and groovy, but what does that do for the business? Like, who cares? You know? So that's why, for me personally, like in the book we wrote, we talked about it as an intelligence architect, which is kind of balancing the humans and the AI. But for me personally, I think it's more like AI ops. So it's kind of like the AI version of a RevOps position that can get in the weeds. So it has that holistic view, you know. And I've seen on LinkedIn like AI transformation, AI ops, AI strategy, like it's all sorts of names, you know.
That's one of the archetype sub roles that I think is growing like a lot.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. No, again, nothing against teaching engineers. It wouldn't surprise me if it becomes more AI in general versus just go to market. But
yeah, it's interesting. I think the other archetype that I found that's like probably the most technical one is an engineer who moves to go to market, but they're actually building product growth. It's a smaller subtype. They're usually like very technical and in large organizations because they have been coding and now they're like embedded in the go-to-market team. They can usually build some cool stuff.
Yeah, the challenge I have with that is like it's a forward deployed engineer concept, right? It's like,
no, because they're in your company. They're an internal.
I know it's the same concept. It's just you're going internal versus external. It's the same concept though. And the challenge I have is that the people that are doing it, like, to have a really good forward deployed engineer or have a go-to-market, whatever you want to call the word that focuses internally, they have to understand the tech and AI ability enough, and then also know how to then map it towards business initiatives. And that's where I think a lot of coders falter, not because they falter their own, but because they don't have the experience in go-to-market to know where this make impact versus making cool stuff, you know? So that's why I think you need to have a leader who understands enough of the technical, but can also aim that power at a problem that actually make that difference.
I mean, yes, but also I think engineers are interested in this. I'm helping my partner run. He's running a big conference called AI That Engineer. We're doing an AI and GTM track. And I think the point of a track is bring technical people who are now in GTM so they can show how it can be useful, but you have to think bigger. And you're right, I've been doing talks with them and they're like, I'm like, okay, but what's the impact? And I think you have to help them think that way, but I think there will be a bigger trend in the market in that direction. I'm hoping.
It's just a timing thing. It's just where we are in the market, you know? Yeah.
What are you most excited? How do you think the GTM team will look like in the next, if you're building a GTM team from now from scratch, how are you thinking about adapting it for what the future looks like with all these changes?
So I've thought about this a lot, and only because like what inspired this thought around this organizational thing was thinking about hierarchy. And you guys read the thing from Jack from Block around hierarchy to intelligence, his paper he put out like 2 months ago? You read that? It's fascinating. So I'll summarize. So Jack, who's the CEO of Block, who was at Twitter, if you know Twitter back in the day, Jack, went to Block and he laid off 4,000 people 3-4 months ago. Right after that, he put out a paper called Hierarchy to Intelligence, where he maps out that every organization he's ever known or been working in is formed on the old Roman structure of having 10 people manager, 10 people manager, 10 people manager, and has this hierarchy structure. And his paper was all about what if we reimagined the hierarchy. So instead of doing what we've always done and try to make the hierarchy cheaper or faster, what if we redid the entire thing from the guts, you know? And so his thinking was having an individual contributor, a directly responsible individual, and then a player coach. Those are the three archetypes that he wants to do, which they all kind of, sound like exactly what they are. The directly responsible individuals, like someone who's over marketing and responsible for the marketing number, versus ICs who are actually in the meat and getting stuff done. So, but they're mapping it differently to where instead of the human manager being the center point of decision making, it's AI. So AI is the center, and everyone has offshoots off of the same AI that's informing the entire organization, which is fascinating to think about. Obviously, they're not there yet. It's a big experiment, but I thought about this a lot about most people on like their Claude Code or Cowork or Perplexity or whatever tool you may use. When you do your folder system, most people do it like a hierarchy. They have marketing and all the subfolders and sub archetypes and that kind of stuff, and they have sales and whatever you're optimizing for, when it should look more like a graph where everything is connected. And when you think about what would it look like if you had, if an organization was set up like a graph versus a hierarchy, what would that look like? And I'm, again, still in this process of figuring this out myself because I don't know if anyone has the right answer yet, but I've been thinking about this a lot of saying, how do I make it so, to Jack's point, how to make it so AI is the core intelligence where there's data at the core versus me at the core of marketing? Like, how do I make it so, not that I'm replaced as a marketing leader, but more of how do we make sure the entire team has the same access to the same stuff so I'm not a bottleneck and the intelligence is the core part of it, which I'm figuring out. Like transparently, I don't have it figured out, but I'm working on it.
That's interesting. No, we're doing the same thing. I think the thing we're trying to do is each of us is building a chief of staff, and the chief of staff agent is the only agent we talk to, and that agent creates all the other sub agents. There's not a lot of tools that support this. We're using craft agents for this. But then we're thinking of basically building like a memory for each of our chief of staffs, and my memory can access everyone else's, like my chief of staff can access everyone else's. We're putting it in Notion for now. I think we're also trying the same thing. We'll see. There's probably going to be tools, but right now it's not easy to do this.
Yeah, when you look at like the YC Combinator, one of the concepts they called out for in the last request for AI startups was a company brain or some sort of intelligence layer that maps towards the entire company, which is, again, fascinating because, as you all know, AI has context limitations. So it's figuring out how do you have enough context to store all the information inside of a company that's more AI native than Snowflake. It's just, I don't have an answer for you, but it'll be a fascinating thing to see where we go.
So you've talked about human genius being one of the most durable competitive moats, even as AI gets smarter. What do you mean by that, right? Like, how will that be a moat even once we've reached AGI, and how do you protect it?
Well, this clearly stating, and this might be my own faulty thinking here, but after I thought of this many, many times, when everyone has access to the same tools and same tech, and when AGI gets here and can consume everything on the planet, the one thing that it cannot consume is my brain, me, my soul, my genius, me. So therefore, the moat is me, what I think, what I create, how I put things together, my experience, my past, my strengths, my weaknesses all become a part of that moat. And I put an article out on Revenue Magazine back in, 2 years ago, talking about this concept because everyone's asking the question, like, what happens to humans when this, AGI comes? I'm like, well, even if an AGI appeared, it's going to be a separate entity that will not eradicate your own ingenuity. Now, will it take over and terminate us all? Maybe, who knows? I don't know. I'm more of an optimistic thing that's not going to happen, but still the point is that AI, even if it is AGI, will never replace me as a human. And so it's really about I have found it really hard for me to compete against someone who has passion for a particular subject. Even though AI can make amazing music, and I make music all the time with AI, it still pales in comparison to some people who are really good songwriters, like a Paul McCartney or to a Brian Wilson from Beach Boys or Michael Jackson. Like, I don't see AI, it can replicate it and make something different or combine Michael Jackson with Billy Joel. But as far as being Michael Jackson, I don't see that happening. He'll make new music, and I do think it will be aiding innovation. There'll be a whole other category, but it'll never replace Michael Jackson. Does that make sense? So that's why I'm like, it doesn't matter what your role is, kind of to the point earlier on forward deployed engineers or go-to-market engineers. It's the creativity and the magic inside of each person that they add in from whatever place it comes from, that whatever that inspiration is, that makes the workflows, that makes your sales process, that makes your BDRs, makes the BDR talking to a C-suite, that little creativity thing that they did in a video they left for him. That's the magic behind it that people are looking for. They want to have some cleansed version of that. They want to have a little more of the human element, so, and that will probably change over time, but I'm sticking to that story for now.
So, that's a really great place to end. And that kind of takes us into one of our fast, end of podcast questions, which is, you've talked about creativity and but if we were to train an AI on you and your area of genius, what do you think this AI would specialize on?
For me personally? Oh, gosh. I have no idea. I've tried this myself and more than likely come up with some go-to-market AI things about my dogs and kids and mix things up and make it some weird mix of stuff right now in the current state. So
what's your favorite tool you're using, AI tool you're using right now?
I'm a big fan of Perplexity. Been geeking out to Perplexity Computer. Love Cloud Code. Cloud Design's awesome. I'm a big Notebook LM fan. Been that way for a long time. Only because I'd put in research papers in Notebook and then go mow my lawn and listen to a podcast about research. Is really nice. And then I like some niche stuff. So obviously OneMind, I'm here because I'm geeking out about the tech. OneMind's a killer technology. And then there's one called Revik AI, which is like a pipeline analysis to kind of do correlation between what's working and not working, which is really, really cool. I could talk hours about this because I have so many cool techs I've either used or seen. But
how about if you were to ask one question of our next Future of Marketing guests, you don't know who they are, but they're a CMO struggling with AI, what would you ask?
I would ask, what do you think is holding you back from the next level of you hitting whatever goals you have in your mind?
What do you think is holding you back?
It's a good question. Time is the main thing right now. But I'll be honest, I think the answer for most people is mindset. Even though I try to push others in my own mindset, I still feel like I'm still anytime I have limiting beliefs, I'm like, limiting belief, I got to fix that. So I'm always analyzing my own thoughts. And I grew up as a life coach, so I'm always thinking about how I think, like metacognition. I'm always thinking about how do I think about this and how do I change how I think so I can get another level. So I'm not perfect at it, but working on it.
It's pretty inspiring. I love that. I think that's probably what's holding me back. So I think I love that answer. Oh, well, it was so great having you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you so much for having me, and for the audience listening, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, help more people find the show.
Hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, rate, review, or share with a colleague who may be navigating the same challenges.
Want to dive deeper? Head to fom.xyz for show notes, resources, and more. See you next time.